Story 1. I've lived in my apartment for quite a while now, on the third floor. The woman who owns the apartment above me came knocking one day because her tenant had been causing problems. She wanted to ask if I'd had any issues with him. We had a long chat at my door, and at one point I said, "Sorry, I can't invite you in for a coffee. I'm just heading out." You know, just being polite, not actually inviting her in. She asked for my number and said she'd send me hers, just in case there were more issues with her tenant. That seemed fair enough. The guy had tried to intimidate me once, so it made sense for us to be able to contact each other if something came up. The next day, I was in my music room playing guitar when there was a knock at the door. I opened it, and it was her again. She said, "Oh, I heard you playing the Rolling Stones, was that Wild Horses?" I said, "Yeah." And she goes, "Oh, just marry me now." Mind you, I had literally told her the day before that I was engaged. Then she asked if I'd teach her 13-year-old daughter guitar. I told her I don't teach guitar. That should have been the end of it, but nope. She started sending me messages through the mobile application owned by Meta that allows for text and media sharing. Not about the apartments, but just random chit-chat, including frequently asking if I was still with my partner. I kept my replies short and polite, hoping she'd take the hint. Then one day, I was in my kitchen making coffee, and I saw her parents pull into the car park. I'd never met them before, though I had seen them with her in the parking lot. But now, they waved up at me like we were old friends. So I started wondering what exactly she'd been saying about me. After her next random message, I finally told her. When we spoke, I mentioned I'm engaged. I only gave you my number to discuss apartment issues. She went quiet for about 6 months. Then, at 4 in the morning, I got a message saying, "Hey, how are you?" Followed by another at 5:30 saying, "I'm worried about you. The least you can do is answer your darn phone." At that point, I replied, "I'm blocking your number. Please don't try to contact me again." And I did. My fiancée was furious, and honestly, I don't blame her. Why did this woman think she was entitled to ignore the fact that I'm engaged, entitled to disregard my clear boundaries, entitled to ask for free guitar lessons, and entitled to message me at 4 in the morning months after I told her to stop? Some people genuinely believe that basic respect and boundaries just don't apply to them. Story 2. A story of accidental sweet revenge. Recently, there was a protest near my city against the expansion of an open-pit mine into a natural and highly biodiverse area. Protesters went to occupy the mine, trespassing, and sleep there. Now I fully support their cause, and I truly believe protests have their place in most countries. But there are a few reasons why I think their approach to the situation is dumb. Namely, the fact my country is one of the rare truly direct democracies in the world. If you want something changed, literally anyone can go collect signatures for it. And it gets put up for a vote if you collect enough of them. The number is relatively low and very achievable. By extension, the government tends not to really respond to illegal protests, strikes, etc. I know this is not essential to the story, but I'm simply trying to illustrate how this protest wasn't doing much other than putting people in danger and feeding the egos of a bunch of idiots who look like they're cosplaying as parents' disappointments and want to make a statement. If they were out collecting signatures, I'd be the first to sign. This story starts when a friend approached me to ask me if I had a sleeping bag I could lend to her. I didn't understand that she wanted it because she was planning on going to that protest, and I would never have lent it to her had I known exactly what she was planning on doing with it, because it is clear that event could only have been a crap show. Bunch of drunk high people illegally camping on the edge of an enormous man-made cliff. Anyways, being the trusting idiot I am, I lent her the sleeping bag without second thought. She went to the protest and just left the sleeping bag lying around while she went off to do her protest-wise stuff. Now the issue with leaving stuff lying around at that kind of event is that these people are also highly opportunistic anarcho-communists. The sleeping bag disappeared instantly. When my friend realized this, she went to speak to one of the organizers. By his own account, this is the conversation he had with one of the protesters. "Hey, Do you know who that sleeping bag belongs to? No idea, you can take it. Nice, walks off with sleeping bag. Yup, that's how selfish, inconsiderate, and stupid these people are. By the way, the organizer still doesn't understand what is wrong with what he and the protester did. I can picture this idiot thinking to himself, "It isn't her sleeping bag, it's our sleeping bag." Anyways, the sleeping bag was gone. I wouldn't care that much about it if it wasn't for the fact that the sleeping bag belonged to my grandfather, who suffered from Parkinson's disease and passed away a few years ago. I never got to know him while he wasn't in pain, and it was truly heartbreaking to grow up watching him get weaker and weaker every time I saw him. To me, that sleeping bag represented a time where he was healthy enough to go out and enjoy a weekend camping in nature. It really meant a lot to me, and I'm wondering why I lent it to anyone in the first place. Sometimes I have too much faith in people not being idiots jerks. There is literally a 0% chance of me ever seeing that sleeping bag again, and it's thrown me into a weird, semi-grieving state of mind, coupled with absolute disbelief of the hypocrisy that occurred at that protest. However, there is a bright side to this story, and that bright side is called sweet, sweet revenge. Although I have to admit it was completely accidental. You see, the protesters who were occupying that mine are all very hardcore vegans, to the point of being perfectly happy going to jail over the illegal stuff they do on a regular basis to support their cause. Well, it turns out that my grandfather's sleeping bag was manufactured before synthetic insulating fillers were widespread. Suckers absolutely filled to the brim with, wait for it, goose down of all things. Down is the really soft feathers they put in bed covers, pillows, and sleeping bags to keep warm, which vegans are obviously completely opposed to as it requires killing birds. This will never bring the sleeping bag or my grandfather back. But every morning I now get to wake up and chuckle at the fact this may be the very moment some jerk thief who happens to also be a vegan will also wake up in my grandpa's sleeping bag, only to notice a real feather is tickling the tip of his nose, and in sheer horror come to the realization that the stolen sleeping bag he has been sleeping in so comfortably is actually a huge warm pile of dead birds. This may seem cruel, but I have no respect for the jerk who did this to me. The thought of his face when he makes that discovery makes me smile at the memory of my grandfather. The sleeping bag is old and has a few holes, so this is likely to happen sooner than later. To top it all off, my grandfather worked for one of the most notorious environmentally destructive transnational corporations. I am actually slightly embarrassed that this is my heritage, and I am by no means proud of it, being a nature enthusiast, but screw it. If it means I can toast my grandfather at the expense of some stealing jerk who is literally sleeping in his own hypocrisy, I'm more than happy to do so. The thief will never know this, but it feeds my cynical sense of humor. So there you go, the story of how got back at a thief without even meaning to. Disclaimer, I have nothing against veganism, and I fully respect vegans. However, I have no respect for jerks. I also truly respect people who protest for the causes they believe in. But once again, I have no respect for jerks. Story 3. I rented a small block of land just outside town to keep my horses on it. Horses weren't uncommon in the area, but also there were a lot of residential areas around, so sometimes I would turn up to my pasture and people would be there with their children petting the horses over the fence. Didn't bother me as both of my horses were pretty nice and polite to pet. One day I was out there just doing chores. Weeding, cleaning, fixing fences, etc. Normal horse stuff. I had my headphones in and I'm working away when I hear shouting. I look over to the gate by the road and I see a man and two young girls, they're 7-5-ish, beaconing me over. I walk over, assuming they want a pat and maybe feed a carrot to the horses. I say hello, and the first thing he said was, "My kids want to ride your horses." Not even a, "Can my kids ride you horses?" Nope. Want. For reference, my horses were an ex-racehorse who was still learning where the off button was, and a very large, very strong dressage horse who was highly trained and also very highly strung. So safe to say, even if I wanted to let the kids ride, these horses were not child safe. I explained this to him. plus that I didn't have any of my riding gear with me as I hadn't planned on riding that day. The dad just rolled his eyes and goes, "It's not that hard, just put them on the horse and lead them around," before trying to open the gate to let his daughters in. Lucky for me, I always kept the gate padlocked as it led to a busy road, and I didn't want the horses getting out. I again explained that they couldn't ride my horses, and he was better off looking up a riding school or a trail riding place if they wanted to ride. At this point, he realized I wasn't budging. Plus, my horses had walked off to the other side of the field behind a tree line, so were out of sight. So he turned back towards the car while loudly saying, "Come on, girls, this mean lady doesn't think you deserve to ride the horses," which caused them to start crying as he loaded them up into the car before flipping me off and taking off down the road. Story 4. Hey everyone, so here's the cast for this story. The entitled mom, her calm little boy, the police officer, the deputy, and me. Here's where the story begins. Last week, my birthday was on Sunday, so my parents decided that we would go out to Yuma, Arizona to get me my first truck. I honestly had no idea why they were taking me out there, but when we arrived, I realized it was for me. We got the truck and brought it home. Now it's Wednesday, and I'm out front changing the oil on it. While I'm working, I suddenly hear my gate shake. I look up and see an entitled mom standing out front, aggressively rattling the gate. Me? "Excuse me, ma'am, this is private property." The entitled mom stops shaking the gate and says, "Hey, do you own that little sport utility vehicle?" She said that because my truck has a camper shell, which makes it look like a small sport utility vehicle. Me: "Yes, I do." Entitled mom: "Are you selling it?" Me: "No, sorry, but thanks for asking." Entitled mom: $700. Me: "What?" Entitled mom: "I'll give you $700 for it." Me: "Ma'am, I already said no." Entitled mom: "Please, my son needs it." She pointed toward her son, who was probably around 6 years old. At this point, I was getting really frustrated. She just wouldn't let up, and my patience was already wearing thin because the oil change had been giving me trouble. Me: "Listen, lady, I'm going to ask one more time nicely, please leave my property." Entitled mom: "Give it to me now." Then she used a racial slur because I'm part Italian. That's when I completely lost my cool and said something I probably shouldn't have. Me: "What did you just say to me, you short witch?" Entitled mom: "You heard me. Go back to Italy," she shouted while continuing to call me names and shaking the gate even harder. At that point, I walked back toward the house to grab my baseball bat and my phone to call the police. She kept rattling the gate even more aggressively. Now with a baseball bat in hand, I shouted, "I'm going to go full salary on you if you don't leave now." Bonus points if you understand that reference. She saw me holding the baseball bat and screamed, "Come any closer and I'll call the police." I stepped closer and said, "Too late. I already did." I pointed down the street, where a police car was pulling up. The officer stepped out of his car just as the entitled mom said, "Officer, this guy stole my sport utility vehicle and refuses to give it back." She repeated the slur again instead of guy. Me: "No, I didn't." Officer: All right, everyone calm down. I'm going to talk to him first, then I'll talk to you, ma'am, okay?" We both agreed. The officer walked over to me while the entitled mom tried to enter my driveway. The deputy told her to stay put. Entitled mom: "Why should I stay put? He stole my sport utility vehicle." Deputy: "Ma'am, stay put, or I will be forced to detain you." Entitled mom: "Fine." Officer: "Sir, do you have any cameras around here by any chance?" Me: "Yes, I do, actually." The old owner of the house had been a bit paranoid and installed security cameras all around. Officer: "May I please see the footage?" Me: "Yes, you may." I took the officer inside while the deputy kept an eye on the entitled mom outside. The officer began watching the footage, which clearly showed the entitled mom attempting to break in. Suddenly, from outside, I heard the deputy shout, "Ma'am, stay back, ma'am." Then came the unmistakable sound of a taser being deployed. The officer immediately ran outside, and I followed. We found the entitled mom lying on the ground with a knife in her hand and a taser probe stuck in her arm. "Officer, what happened?" "Deputy, she charged at me with a knife." "Officer, all right, put her in cuffs." The deputy handcuffed her while she shouted, "This is illegal, I know my rights." Deputy, "Good. Then you know you have the right to remain silent." He closed the patrol car door. The officer wished me a good day and told me they would handle everything from there. The last I heard, she was facing up to 15 years for the attempted assault of a law enforcement officer. And that's how my relaxing day working on my new truck turned into one of the wildest experiences of my life. Story 5. Karen, entitled mom. Calvin, entitled son, 11. Me, 18. Bront, my pet spider, 6. My dad loves spiders, so I grew up with lots of them and know how to care for them. When I moved out a couple months ago, he gave me the Goliath bird eater he'd had for a couple years. Bront, Goliath bird eaters are one of the largest spiders in the world, largest by mass and second largest by leg span, and they're not beginner pets. They're expensive and can be hard to care for. I really loved Bront, and I know most people say spiders aren't capable of love. But she recognized me, and I like to think she loved me back in her own way. I took excellent care of her, and I talked to her. So, a few days ago, my roommate's aunt, Karen, came over with her son, Calvin. Karen seemed perfectly nice at first, asking me what I'm studying, what I want to do, chatting with my roommate about family gossip. Calvin, on the other hand, threw himself on the couch and kept whining that he was bored and wanted to go home. Karen excused his behavior, saying he was just tired after school. I told him he could watch Netflix if he wanted, and he agreed. He stayed in the living room while the rest of us went to the kitchen. About a half hour later, I went to the bathroom and noticed he wasn't in the living room. The only other place he could be was one of our bedrooms, so I checked my roommate's first. He wasn't there, but some things were messed up, and were both very neat, so I knew he must have gone through her stuff. I went into my room and found him looking through my bedside table, but more importantly, Bront was crushed on the floor. I immediately started screaming at him, slightly incoherently, went over and grabbed him by the shoulders, demanding to know what happened to my spider. He started yelling for his mom and trying to get away from me. Quick interruption. I know I shouldn't have grabbed him, but I was completely panicked and not thinking straight. Karen and my roommate ran in, and she yelled at me to let go of her child. Roommate noticed Bront and gently pulled me away, and we all went to the living room, me still sobbing. Once I was able to talk again, I demanded to know what he did to Bront, and Calvin very boldly said, "It was creepy, and it got mad when I picked it up, so I killed it. It's just a bug." I started screaming at him again, calling him a monster and a horrible brat, and Karen started yelling over me not to talk to him like that. And it was all just chaos until my roommate yelled, "Shut up," louder than both of us. She told us to calm down, and Karen says, quieter, that I'm bullying her son and overreacting. I said, still yelling, that Bront was my pet and I adored her, and that he killed her for no reason. She was in her terrarium, not bothering him until he took her out, without knowing how to handle her, and terrified her. I also started rambling about how she could have lived up to 25 years, but my roommate cut me off at that point. Karen kept insisting that she was just a spider and that Calvin did nothing wrong. At that point, I told them to get out or I'd start throwing things. They left, and apparently Karen's been texting my roommate to say she should move out of the crazy house. We gave Bront a little funeral in the woods. Story 6. This happened in Victoria, Australia. For context, a rental bond here is similar to what people in the United States call a deposit. It's the amount you pay when moving into a rental property. C is physically disabled and receives financial assistance through Centrelink. In October of last year, C responded to a housemate advertisement and moved in with an engaged couple, B and Riley, both of whom use they/them pronouns. C paid both the bond and the rent right away to B, and took a few weeks to submit his lease forms. C, being careful, kept screenshots of every payment he made for bond, rent, and bills, and he still has all of them. When C first moved in, B and Riley told him they would be living in the house until around June or July of 2025. Later, they changed that to February 2025. Then, in December 2024, they messaged C saying they would actually be moving out in a month, and that they had already paid rent up to that date. C also paid his rent until the move-out date and made arrangements to leave at the same time. Unfortunately, this last-minute notice left C scrambling to find a new place. He had to stay in a boarding house for a while, which was unsuitable for his disabilities. Thankfully, he's now living somewhere safe. Meanwhile, B and Riley proudly posted on social media that they had bought a house. The couple told C that the real estate agency was being difficult and refusing to return their bond. In Victoria, if the real estate agent or landlord doesn't return a tenant's bond, the tenants can apply for a bond return through the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal, known as the Rental Tribunal. C suggested doing that, but the couple said they couldn't afford to file an application. C offered to cover the cost himself because he desperately needed his bond money back. However, the couple told him he wasn't actually on the lease, so he couldn't do anything about it. To make matters worse, B and Riley were publicly posting online about buying luxury items, things like lip fillers, collectible figures, and even a pool table for their home bar, all while telling C they couldn't afford the tribunal application, which costs around $70, far less than the price of those items. From February through June, B and Riley repeatedly told C they couldn't return his bond money because they still hadn't received their bond from the real estate agency. They claimed they were too stressed and too burnt out to complete the tribunal paperwork. Riley sent C a few partial payments of $100 each, claiming they were out of their own pocket, but those payments stopped in April. C continued offering to pay the tribunal fee and help them with the paperwork to recover the bond. But the couple kept making excuses. When C suggested that they meet up and complete the paperwork together, Riley initially agreed, but then said that both of them had a bad case of illness. However, at the same time, B was posting Instagram stories of themselves going out clearly not bedridden. Starting in May, C's health began to decline drastically. He suffers from nerve damage in his lower back that causes difficulty walking, and the medication he takes makes it hard for him to speak or control his hands. A few of us, including myself, have been helping him with daily living tasks, paperwork, and appointments. Around this time, Riley began acting increasingly hostile towards C. They would promise that they or B would send repayment transfers that never arrived. When C, always polite, would follow up to mention that he hadn't received the money, Riley would lose their temper, saying they had no money and that they were paying C back out of pocket, even though the payments had stopped months earlier. Riley even told C, "I'm at my wit's end, so don't push me." We have all the downloaded messages, and C was nothing but polite. There was no reason for such a reaction. Despite claiming to be broke, both B and Riley were posting online about new furniture and renovations for their new house. In June, C confided in a social worker at the hospital where he was receiving treatment about the situation with his bond. The social worker made a report, and C provided a full account along with all downloaded conversations from the Sharehouse group chat and private messages with B and Riley. His case was referred to a community legal service, which then advised his disability advocate to send a demand letter requesting the rest of his money back. At that point, everyone assumed B and Riley had already received their bond back from the rental agent. Normally, tribunal claims are resolved within 2 weeks of moving out, not 5 months later. Their claim that they were too stressed to handle the paperwork had always sounded suspicious, especially given their ongoing hostility whenever C brought it up. However, when the real estate agency was contacted, it turned out B and Riley hadn't received their bond back due to unpaid rent. They had rental arrears because they hadn't been paying rent at all, which was news to C, who had been paying rent to B every week. So, B and Riley had taken C's bond money, never lodged it properly, never added him to the lease, and then pocketed the rent payments he made to them instead of passing them on to the real estate agency. Because of their unpaid rent, they lost their own bond, yet they spent months lying to C, saying they couldn't return his money because the real estate agency hadn't returned theirs. They were deceiving him from the beginning. Even worse, they told him they were paying him back out of their own pocket, which was also a lie, since C's bond money had gone straight into their pockets to begin with. Additionally, B had shown C a few messages that they claimed were from the real estate agent. When the real estate agent was contacted, she confirmed that she had never written or said the things B claimed. Following this, C's advocate sent B and Riley the official demand letter through email. Their response was full of contradictions. At first, B claimed that C never cleaned and said he did nothing. A few emails later, they changed their story, accusing C of trashing the place before leaving. Then, just days later, Riley claimed that C had refused to pay for damages they had supposedly discussed with him. The advocate, having seen all of the downloaded conversations, knew these accusations were false. The sharehouse messages contained plenty of proof that C regularly cleaned, did chores, and even mowed the lawn. After everyone moved out, all the conversations were about the bond. There was no mention whatsoever of C failing to clean or pay for anything. In fact, as mentioned earlier, there were clear messages of C offering to pay for the tribunal filing so they could all get their bond back. When C was later read the emails, he confirmed that yes, he had cleaned and done chores, and that those supposed conversations Riley referred to never happened. It seemed the couple didn't realize how incriminating their behavior was. Bringing up irrelevant accusations when discussing the bond issue only made them look worse. It's like if someone was being investigated for a serious crime, and instead of sticking to the facts, they started shouting about how the victim was terrible or lazy. It just makes them seem more suspicious. B and Riley also tried to argue that it was C's fault he wasn't on the lease. That claim was ridiculous because, first, regardless of who's at fault, it's still illegal for them to keep C's bond money. Second, if they had added him to the lease like they were supposed to, C would have been able to file a tribunal claim himself and discovered much earlier that they hadn't been paying rent. In between making those accusations, the couple also complained that it was unfair for the advocate to take legal action if they didn't return C's money. Yet somehow, they didn't think it was unfair for them to take C's money, spend it, and lie about it for months. The irony was unreal. The couple also began to treat the disability advocate the same way they treated C. They would promise to send payments on a specific day, like Friday, and then never follow through. Riley eventually offered to pay C back $50 a fortnight, and the advocate agreed to that plan. Riley sent one $50 payment and then stopped entirely. When the advocate followed up via email to remind them of their agreement, they ignored her and never replied again. This entire situation was one of the most disappointing things I've ever witnessed. Between announcing their move with no discussion, forcing C to scramble during a housing crisis just so they could move into their new home sooner, and lying to him about his bond money for months, it's hard to find a lower point of behavior. They repeatedly told him they were too stressed or broke to handle the tribunal paperwork. Even when C offered to pay and do the paperwork himself, they promised payments that never arrived, lied to the disability advocate about someone who literally cannot speak for himself, and showed no sign of remorse. We plan to return to the community legal service and later take the matter to small claims court once C's health improves. He's still receiving medical treatment, and this case has been passed around between different services and departments. With all of C's medical and daily living paperwork, it's been overwhelming. A new case manager recently took over from the previous advocate, but we're still unsure how much progress can be made. B and Riley both love presenting themselves as caring and morally upright people. C, who is of mixed indigenous heritage, found this especially painful because B even had a link on their social media page to an indigenous charity called Pay the Rent. The irony of that was hard to ignore, especially considering B once said that mowing the lawn, doing dishes, vacuuming, and mopping were nothing when C did them. Update. Firstly, C is doing much better these days. He now attends a medical center closer to his home instead of the hospital he used to visit. He's also joined a few online communities and is starting a group for disabled people in the area to connect, share resources, and offer support. As for B and Riley, well, they finally paid C back, apologized for lying to him, and took responsibility for everything. Just kidding. Instead, they posted online about going on vacation. Yes, despite claiming for months that they were too stressed to handle tribunal paperwork and too broke to repay C, they somehow managed to afford flights, hotels, and all the other vacation costs. It was just like that time Riley told C that both of them were sick, while B was posting Instagram stories of themselves going out that very same day, suddenly, miraculously recovered. Someone should call the Vatican, because these two seem to experience miracles on a regular basis. We haven't heard anything from the new case manager who took over from the disability advocate. For now, we're focused on C's ongoing appointments and daily life. He says he doesn't want to think about the couple anymore, and we're respecting that. We did file a police report about the situation. The police said they couldn't charge the couple because it's technically a tenancy matter. But at least there's an official record now useful if we go to small claims court or if B and Riley ever try to financially exploit another vulnerable person. The real estate agency isn't thrilled about being dragged into this months after the tenancy ended. But as we told them, C didn't want to be part of this either. The only people prolonging this situation are B and Riley, because they still refuse to return C's money. The most painful part for C was the betrayal. Riley and C are from the same home state and had similar difficult upbringings. C had even offered to pay for and help Riley with the tribunal paperwork when Riley claimed they were too stressed to do it. He also looked after B and Riley's dogs for free when they went on vacation over Christmas. Despite all that kindness, Riley still lied to him, refused to return his money even though C was on a low income, and misled his disability advocate. C had seen Riley as a friend, someone who understood hardship, but Riley saw C as someone to take advantage of. It's hard to imagine anything more disappointing. To address a few common questions people asked online. This post isn't meant as a criticism of non-binary people. Most of the people involved in this situation are part of the LGBTQ+ community, including me. That's how we all know each other. We have mutual friends who follow B and Riley, which is how we saw their posts. C didn't expect them to accuse him of not cleaning or any of the other lies. He downloaded all the conversations for legal services because they contained discussions about the bond. After everyone moved out, the messages clearly show what was said. The accusations were easy to disprove just by scrolling back through the group chat to when they all still lived together. To those saying things like, "You should have done this or that," or "Why didn't C get legal help earlier?" Please remember that when you read stories like this online, you're seeing a neat, linear version of events with all the confusion and side details cut out. Real life doesn't play out that clearly when you're in the middle of it. C is very non-confrontational. Even when he spoke to them politely and calmly, the couple would overreact. For example, right after they all moved out, C asked if they could forward him the email thread between them and the real estate agent, and B snapped back, "We're not against you," forcing C to reassure them that he didn't think that at all. Or when C gently told Riley that he hadn't received a payment Riley claimed was sent, Riley lashed out, saying, "I'm at my wit's end." Given their pattern of behavior, C was never in a position to confront them more directly or call out their obvious lies like the claim that they couldn't afford the tribunal fee while buying luxury items and home decor.